of happiness, we discussed how we could be happy from our physical life, with it being with having gratitude. We spoke about the concept of having happiness from ourselves, knowing that we're here with a mission and a purpose. So far, so good. Purpose is crucial for happiness. So the question is, how do we find our mission? How do we find our purpose? The story goes, the previous rabbi shares the story that you had a wagon driver driving this wealthy man to a business deal or whatever it might be. And as they stopped in a certain city, they had to stop for Shabbos. So the wagon driver goes ahead and he feeds his horses, he washes them down, he put them in the stables, and he checks himself into the local inn for horse driver, for horse drivers, whatever it's called.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
It's the one just now. I just said it. Wagon drivers, right? So taxi drivers. So he checked himself into the local inn, the motel or whatever it might be. While the wealthy guy goes and takes out the nicest hotel in town, he puts himself in there, he arranges himself a nice meal, and he's ready to go. It's already a few hours before Shabbos, and he's already ready. He's dressed in his finest, and he's on the way to shul. And as he's heading to shul, he sees a different wagon driver who's stuck in the mud with his wagon, and he's asking for help. And he says, my wagon is stuck in the mud, I can't get it out. And sure enough, this nice guy stops and he tries to help him. He starts schlepping, he starts pulling, but when someone his whole life was doing business and he's never had experience with a horse and wagon, it was always someone else that he hired, he doesn't make it any better, he makes it worse. So before you know it, they're sitting there for hours, he's trying to schlep the horse. The time he's done, he's schwitzing, and he's exhausted. His clothing, his beautiful Shabbos clothing, are tattered and dirty with mud, and he didn't even help the guy. Meanwhile, the wagon driver heads out to shul. And he comes to the shul in his regular wagon driver clothing, and he sees a bunch of poor people in the back of the shul, hoping to get a meal, to be invited somewhere for a Shabbos meal. And he sees that there's no one else around to invite them. He doesn't know where his boss is. Unbeknownst to him, his boss has been trying to help this other wagon driver pull the wagon out of the mud. So he says, you know what, guys, come to me for the meal. And sure enough, they come to him, but he didn't have enough food for himself. So he's trying to do them a favor, but such a favor, with such friends, who wants enemies, right? So he invites him to his motel, and he gives them a little bit of herring, a little bit of whatever, and there's nothing. And these souls came up to heaven. And in heaven, they said, we need you to go back down. Because you were created to be a wealthy man. You know why? Because you were sent there with a purpose and a mission. But that mission wasn't to help the wagon driver. The mission wasn't to invite those people for the Shabbos meal. And you would have given them a beautiful meal. You had more food for yourself. You could have fed them all. And the wagon driver, you also had a mission, but your mission wasn't to invite those people. Your mission was to help that wagon driver. You have experience. You could have done it. You could, you know what you're doing. So this is a true story, and it's also our story in terms of the sense that there's such a concept of not finding our mission, making a mistake in terms of misuse, investing ourselves because we're being nice and we're trying to do the right thing, but really it's the wrong thing. We're not supposed to be there. And the question is, how do we find our mission, right? And this is connecting to our course, because we're talking about happiness, finding purpose. How do we find purpose? What is our purpose? So the trick is that finding our mission is actually not difficult. It's actually not hard at all. It's obvious. So the story goes about this guy Joe was applying for a marketing job, and he put in his application, and he comes into the guy's office, and the guy says, I looked at your application, It's not bad, but one thing that's really ticking me off is that you have absolutely no experience with marketing and you're asking for a very high salary. What is this? Why do you think you deserve a high salary if you have no experience in marketing? He's like, it's not easy to do a job that you don't know what you're doing yet. Right? Joe says, I want to get paid more because I don't know what I'm doing. It's not easy. So the point is that it's not hard to know your purpose if you know yourself.
Key.
If you know yourself and you know what comes natural to you, you know what comes easy to you, you know what your talents are. If God gave you these talents, He gave them to you because that is your mission, because that is your purpose. So yes.
If you know your value, do you ask more? Yes, you do. Or do you just do it, whatever, and eventually get to where you want to go?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
That reminds me, I don't want to break this over. When my husband came to this country, he was sponsored by, he was a tool and die maker. And he was sponsored by his uncle's friend in Brooklyn. He was a tough Israeli. So he went there for a month. He felt he was being underpaid, but he wasn't thinking about sponsoring him. So he went and he said, I'm worth more. He said, I need a raise.
That's great.
But I mean, he had no right to do that considering the position, but he knew his value.
That's great.
But that's how it works.
Right.
I mean, all of my experience, I was a receptionist at a law firm. We won't talk too long.
No.
And I was 21 years old. And at the time, I was the receptionist, but they were handing me all the legal papers to do and to write and to do. And I can't answer the phones and do all these legal briefs. So I got the courage and said, I'm going to go into the managing attorney and ask him to hire a receptionist. And if he doesn't, I said I'd quit. I wasn't even able to say I quit. I said, can we hire a receptionist? He went, okay.
That's great. Who's the Zoom user? Who just joined us? If you could tell us who you are. Okay. So I'm asking you to turn to page 88. This is text number 2. And here we're going to be reading a letter of the previous Rebbe. He wrote this letter to a young man, Elya Tzvi Eibender, who was born in Russia. He then moves to America. He's about 30 years old. He's getting married. And he's asking the previous Rebbe, what is my mission in life? What is my purpose? What should I invest myself into? What job should I go into? That type of discussion. And I think this is going to be an interesting letter. Anita, could you read for us?
Certainly.
Go for it.
The Story of Our Lives is a book that requires study. This book ought to be the compass for how we go about life. The story of our lives consists of the reason we were created, to whom we were born, the place of our birth, the time period of our birth, the type of education and guidance we received, the environment in which we grew up, our talents, our inborn emotional disposition, our characteristics and inclinations, how divine providence guided us until the day we became independent and assumed a position in life. These 10 factors form the narratives of our individual lives and become a book that requires study. These factors are supposed to guide which pathways we choose and how we behave, whether in interpersonal relationships or our relationship with God.
Okay, that's great. So what did he do in this letter? He basically told him in short, you have to look at yourself and based on who you are, choose a path. But he broke it down for him. He told him about himself. He said, these would be the 10 things that you've encountered in life that would have formed you. And by revisiting those things, that will lead you to what your purpose is. So what I want to do today is, right now, is to break down those 10 things with you in a suggestive mode. In other words, I'm sure we could say a lot of things. So I'm going to suggest, and the people around this table are welcome to suggest what they think each of these 10 things would bring a factor in our life. While we do that, I invite you to eat a bagel. I also invite you to turn to page 90. Please do eat a bagel.
I'm not so delicate as you could think.
You've opened up the books for everyone. You'll go for the bagel. Please, thank you.
It
So
doesn't have, you know, I did it for you.
on page 90, you could see that there's an exercise. Now, the exercise is, as it says, basically asking you in what way do these factors play a role currently in your life. So I'm going to talk, you're welcome to wait or you're welcome to do it now as I talk. The exercise is personal, right? And I'm not going to ask you to say what it is, but in terms of our conversation, we're just going to be speaking more general. So your personal, maybe the conversation will help you with the exercise. So on a general level, we'll say, let's say parents. How would parents, based on who your parents are, how would that determine your life mission? How would that determine your life experience in a general sense? So what I would suggest is number one, learning from our parents. Depending on who our parents is, we learn from them. We learn from them who to be, and also we sometimes learn what not to be, right? So sometimes we experience things and we say, okay, that's probably something that I should work on. I should be aware of that. That's something that I take from my parents. Another thing that I take from my parents is who to help first. So when it comes to helping people, reaching out, being there for others, Torah teaches us that our circle comes first. And in terms of our circle, we start with our parents, and then it goes to our siblings, and then it goes, it reaches out further and further, ultimately to our community and ultimately to the whole world. But starting with our parents, which would be my take of what the previous Rebbe meant when he said parents. Is there anything else that someone wants to add to that? Right. Influence, exactly. So depending on how they taught us, how they educated us, would affect who we are. And I think the fundamental principle here is recognizing that God runs the world. So if God gave me these parents, that means that that's part of my mission. That's important for me to be able to accomplish what I have to accomplish in this world. Right? And the same would be regarding the second thing. So we have over here birth location, birthplace, right? So in this case, he was born in Russia, he's an immigrant, and often immigrants would run away from where they came from. I don't want to associate myself with my past. And over here, the Rebbe is saying the fact that you were born in Russia is not by mistake. There's obviously a calling for you in terms of the fact that you were born there. Does anyone have something that they want to add to that thing about birthplace, how that would affect our trajectory?
My mother was born from my parents, both of them. The second generation. And basically, the emphasis was being American. That was the emphasis. Should be in that America.
Sure.
The other emphasis was there should be assimilation. My parents, and my mother especially, believed in assimilation, not wearing your identity. In fact, that word Holocaust was never, ever mentioned.
Interesting.
It was not a subject.
Wow.
It was not a subject. It didn't exist. So, primarily, it was the fact that you should not show who you are because of what occurred in the Holocaust.
Interesting.
So we a religion you don't discuss and what your father made or did. Those were the two subjects that were taboo in one that we were told. You don't tell anybody what your father. Not that you did anything illicit, not at all. He was very comfortable growing up, and he did exceedingly well. But these are things that you keep private, and you don't wear them or publicize them. So that was prominent. That was prominent. Although in our education, my mother wanted to cover all bases in our growth.
Sure.
And so when it came to aesthetics, in exposing us to beauties and culture, we had everything.
everything, piano, dance, theater. There was nothing that was left, and we were bat mitzvah. My mother
That's
never lit
interesting.
candles,
Let's see.
never, ever, ever lit
You were
candles
also?
Wow.
Wow.
in the
Yes,
head for Shabbos. My father was never a shul goer, never ever went to shul, except when it was our children's bar mitzvahs. It was something that, I mean, I'm talking from my vantage point. I was the second child. My sister was the first. So I have how she perceived this could be different, but I do know that these are the things that were stated to me
Very interesting.
and how we live. And
Harleen, you want to add something?
My grandparents came from, I guess it was a combination of Poland and Ukraine and Russia, Belarus, all that area. And they came, my grandfather came with his older daughter because they had heard that men went to America and left the other family and started new families. So she, it was a very sharp woman, sent her older daughter. They brought the family over. My grandmother came, she was 13 in 1903. And there were 5 sisters and 1 brother. And everybody went to school immediately. They didn't speak Yiddish or Russian. They learned English. And what I don't remember anybody speaking with an accent. They were young and they wanted to assimilate. They wanted to be Americans. We always knew we were Jews. And while the older bunch of men were alive, I remember these big, long holiday tables and all the prayers and everything. Little by little, my family is still assimilated. I was the oldest of 3, and my father had become ill. He was my nurturer. He was a wonderful person. My other 2 siblings never had the opportunity. Once he became ill, my whole life changed. My mother worked,
Wow.
and I became more of the, yes, I was. And maybe you're into a very responsible person.
That definitely played a role in your
Well, yes.
in who you became.
And I became who I am, and that has pulled me through.
That's
But I
great.
do miss the fact when I met Danny, he's Sephardic Israeli. It was another world and another culture,
introduced you to the whole life.
and I liked it, and it elevated me to a point where I wanted that religion. I wanted the culture. I saw a lot of intermarriage in my family. It
Wow.
upset me.
Mhm.
I had, and I saw what my place was and who I was.
Incredible.
Maybe I was a different person, because.
Incredible. Let's move because the time is ticking. No, it's great. I'll get to you.
You'll get to me.
So we're talking, so the next thing on the list, and again, feel free to be filling it out as we're talking. The next thing on the list is the time period, the call of the hour, like talking about today in America, on a personal level, I could say that, being Chabad until America wasn't about outreach. It was about study. It was about personal growth. It was about connection to God. It was about prayer. It was never about outreach. The only reason why outreach became a thing was because the call of the hour, because this is what was necessary. It's not inherent to the Chabad movement, which is incredibly interesting. You think of Chabad, you think of like buildings and places, and there's obviously a connection to the theology. But in terms of the actual theology, it's nothing to do with outreach. It's about working on yourself and growing and Tanya and animal soul, godly soul, all that stuff. And the reason why the Rebbe said that's important, but we're going to put that on hold because there's the call of the hour. So time period is obviously a big one. Then there is education. So depending on what my education did for me, what my experience was, that would very much affect what my trajectory will be. And I shouldn't waste that. The Rebbe was very into that. There's a number of stories, countless stories, I would say, of people that came to Chabad. They didn't grow up in religious backgrounds. And let's say they were in the middle of studying for a degree or they got a degree in something and they found Chabad and they were enthralled and they fell in love. And they said, you know what, I'm ditching my degree, I'm going to yeshiva, I'm gonna study. And they thought the Rebbe would be floored. Like, of course, you shouldn't, the Rebbe wasn't a fan of everyone, we don't go to university. So the Rebbe, of course, the Rebbe would say, ditch university and come to yeshiva. But the Rebbe wouldn't say that. The Rebbe said, you gave 3 years of your life to becoming, a Greek philosopher in one case, or, a scientist, or whatever it might be. By you ditching school, you wasted 3 years of your life. You think God gave you those 3 years for nothing? You got to finish your degree. You'll find your mission in that. You'll find your purpose in that. And the stories of this are endless of people that said, that they were able to accomplish in terms of their career, and more importantly, in terms of their influence on others in a positive way, more than anyone else could do, because they were a Greek philosopher, because they were a scientist, because they were a doctor. They had the ability to use those things that came into their life in a positive way. So education is a big one. And then the previous Rabbi mentions about growing up. So many of us, it's the same. Where we were born and where we grew up is the same. For this person, growing up where our environment was different because he grew up in Russia. He was born in Russia and then he grew up in America. Regarding what the two of you were sharing about America, so in this case where he grew up in America, the Rebbe, despite being a Russian immigrant, coming to America, and most Chabad Russians that came to America didn't appreciate the Americans. In Russia, you're talking about guys that were hardcore. They weren't, they called them chokoladnikas. They called the Americans were chokoladnikas. They were chocolaters. Like, you didn't have chocolate in Russia. You worked hard, you sweated, you didn't complain. You put your life on the line. People were, giving their life for Torah and Judaism. And here you had a bunch of youngsters, American boys, that Chabadniks, but completely off the, they're completely off the radar. They're eating chocolate and they're enjoying life and they're complaining and everything is about themselves and they don't have to get out of themselves. And despite the fact that that's all true, but the Rebbe embraced the Americans. He loved the Americans, and he always said, and in many ways he adapted the culture of America, and he said Americans are open. The Americans are what's the word? I'm thinking of a Yiddish word, breit. I don't know how to say that in English.
Yiddish, I'm supporting.
No.
Breit means literally wide, but it means luxurious. Like we don't when we eat, we have more food than we need on the plate. When we have an event, it's throwing it out of the ballpark. Okay, and the Rebbe was saying, which became the motto of Chabad. If you look at Chabad around the world, thinking of Chabad as a Russian organization, it came from Russia. If we stay in the Russian mindset, then every shul would be, a little stable, and the events would be, and that's a little bit of herring, a little bit of. That's what Russians were. They didn't need much, but Americans are breit, right? That have the breit guy, and that's the Rebbe said that's what we got to be. We're American. You got to embrace that about yourself and use that, because that's an incredible thing to have. To not have that small-mindedness, and go out and do it in a big way. So that's an example where I'm in America. This is my surrounding. This is my environment, and that's what I'm going to take. Then there's okay. So that was 7 things of my past, my history. So just to run through again, we have parents, place of birth, time period of birth, education, environment. Now we have 3 things that are more connected to our personality. Number 1, there's our talents, our natural inborn talents, arts. The famous story goes of the baby camel turns to mom camel and says, "Mom, why do we have flat feet?" And mom says, "Well, you know why? Because camels are able to go into the desert, and they don't want to be able to hold their ground in the sand, so we have flat feet." And then he says, "Well, Mom, why do we have these funny eyes?" And she says, "Well, in the desert, there's a lot of sand blowing, So be able to protect our eyes from the sand, we have these long eyebrows and whatever, eyelashes, whatever. And he says, and why do we have these big humps? And she says, well, because in the desert, you go for so long and you need a lot of water. So she says, okay, Mom, so what are we doing in the Bronx Zoo? So talents are a big thing to say, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like the story of the wagon driver with the wealthy person. Why did God create me this way? I have to use my talents.
No,
Sure, please.
I am a retired purpose coach. And what I would do with people is I would help them that they were fired from their job in their fifties or whatever. I won't go into the whole thing, but I use John Collins' personality trait. I also went by Picasso. Picasso said, find your talents and your gifts and give them away. Now, it doesn't mean that, okay, you're going to do it for free, but once you find them, you're giving it away, it really gives you that purpose. So, and then it's also the personality traits, or are you realistic? Are you investigative? Are you artistic? Because one of the things that the Cantor had said on an interview with, oh God, I forgot his
Arnie.
name. With what?
Arnie.
Yeah, with Arnie, he said, if you're very, very artistic and you don't let it out,
Sure.
you become blocked. Also, are you social? Are you entrepreneurial? Are you conventional? And once you find all those things out, they're put into
Sure.
careers. So it is your personality that really you have to learn, but it's also, are you giving it away?
Sure. That's
Even
great.
if it is for a living. But
So we'll get to that later. That's going to be the end of this class. That's the closing of the class, but that's very good. And then finally, we have emotional disposition. What are emotional situation? What is our emotional well-being? That is something that we will talk about for a very long time. The second half of this class will be about that. So we're not going to talk about that right now. And then finally, there's also character and inclinations. It's the same thing. And then there is divine providence. Where my life led me. The most famous story that I could think of that says this loud and clear is Queen Esther is in the palace of King Ahasuerus, and she has no idea why God wants her to be there. Queen Vashti was killed. He was looking for a new queen. She was arrested, brought to the palace. Now she's chosen as the queen. She's forced to live there. She doesn't tell anyone that she's Jewish. And sure enough, Haman comes around and says, I'm going to kill the Jewish people. And Mordecai turns to Esther and says, you got to go to the king. And she says, he's going to kill me. And Mordecai tells Esther, perhaps this is the reason why you're here. Why else did God bring you here? And what's interesting is he said, perhaps, because he said, I'm not, I don't know for sure. I can't tell you guaranteed why something happened to you. But you have to look at yourself, at your situation, and where God brought you, at divine providence, and say, this happened because it's part of my mission. What is it for my mission? I'm not sure. But in this situation, said Mordecai, perhaps you're there because you're going to save the Jewish people. Okay, so that's, talking about, just to sum it up, previous rabbis writing this letter saying, you want to find your mission, you want to find your purpose, you got to look at yourself. And he breaks it down, the place you were born, your parents, your background, your environment, your talents, your character, your divine providence. These are things that are going to lead you. And it's not so hard. It just takes a little bit of thinking and slowing down. Okay, so now we're going to revisit the most comprehensive part of this list, which is emotional disposition and inclinations. Why the most comprehensive? Because it's a little more refined. So if I'm good at playing piano, I should probably play piano. But over here, I'm emotional. Where is that going to lead me? So here we're going to break it down, try to figure out what are the different emotions that we might have, and where that would lead us in terms of what type of person we could be. And that would make us the best person that we could be. And again, I want to invite you to take a bagel because then I'm gonna have to eat it, and that's not good news. Um, so how are we gonna do that? So what we're gonna do today is just gonna be fun, which is we're going to talk about the 10 Sefirot. Did everyone hear about the 10 Sefirot or no?
Times.
So the 10 Sefirot, I think maybe you were in my tiny class, that class, or no? Okay. So the 10 Sefirot, we'll have a video of it and we'll talk about it. The 10 Sefirot are the 10 attributes of God. Now, what does it mean that God has 10 attributes? God doesn't have 10, God is one. But just like you have a woman, see on the board it says a woman. So a woman, it could be is a loving mom on the one hand, and she's a wise leader on the other. And her child views her as this loving mom, and her coworker views her as wise, or as, as an entrepreneur, as strong, as whatever it might be. Very different. And in essence, this is one person. It's not different. It's not a splintered human being. It's one person with one soul, and her core is coming out in different areas and being perceived differently. So when God creates the world, he creates a finite world. And because he creates a finite world, we perceive him in finite attributes. Or in other words, he, to a certain extent, I'm trying to think of the word, give me a second, conforms himself to finite attributes. And these divide into 10. These are called the 10 Sefirot of Atzilot, of the world of emanation. And when there's 10. This is not counted.
Oh, no. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's not counted. That's Keter. So that's
Okay.
that's our
That's my
personality.
Okay.
That's the
That's
personality
what I read
itself.
through this also. Okay, got it. There was
Um,
one that wasn't counted.
that's great. So we could see the 10 Sefirot on page 93. And here is a video that's going to break it down. We're going to go into each one of them more particularly, but sit back, relax, and enjoy. It's an incredible video, actually.
What does a painting, a piano, and the primordial pegs of creation have in common? The human eye can detect about 10 million colors, but what we are actually looking at is a tiny group of primary colors that combine in millions of variations of ratios that drench the universe in delightful and awesome visual coloring. A similar principle works for music. Innumerable melodies exist, which can be played on countless forms of instrument. But the wonder we are hearing can be stripped down to just a petite handful of primary musical notes. That's how God created the universe, with just a basic handful of spiritual elements that combine in myriads of ratios to form the splendid symphony of creation. God first created the mystical Sephirot, 10 divine channels through which is infinite light to be condensed, contracted, and then released as individual attributes that could eventually give rise to a diversity of finite creations. Let us make man in our own image, said God. No sooner said than done. Man was created in his Creator's image with his own internal set of 10 attributes through which he operates. These 10 spiritual attributes are reflected in the physical human anatomy. Let's go through them one by one. Sephira 1. Chokhmah. Chokhmah is the initial seed of an idea, the flash of undeveloped inspiration. It enables us to be creative, spiritual, transcendent. Sephira 2. Bina. Bina is the development of ideas. It enables us to be logical, analytical, organized. Sephira 3. Dot. Dot allows us to focus on an idea so that it becomes relevant and personally meaningful. It enables us to be attentive, principled, involved. Sephira 4. Chesed is the power to love, share, and look kindly upon others. It enables us to be generous, optimistic, sociable. Sephira 5, Gavrura, is the power of discipline and restraint. It enables us to be calculated, cautious, serious. Sephira 6, Tiferet, is the power to empathize and harmonize kindness with strictness based on the needs of others. It enables us to be balanced, empathetic, harmonious. Sephira 7, Netzach, is the power of determination to overcome challenge. It enables us to be persistent, forceful, daring. Sephira 8, Hod, is the power of humility, gratitude, and submitting to a higher cause. It enables us to be thankful, devoted, accommodating. Sephira 9, Yesod, is the power to focus on others and to build genuine relationships. It enables us to be selfless, altruistic, loyal. And last, but not at all least, Sephira 10, Malchut. Malchut has multiple functions. It is the power of speech and action, effective communication and leadership, and to be receptive to others. It enables us to be leading, communicating, achieving. So there you have it, the 10 components of the human self, the internal mechanism upon which all intellect, emotion, and actions run. God used tens of Sephirot to create his universe, and we use our 10 Sephirot to shape our miniature universes.
Okay, so let's go through that. I'm sure you all got that down pat. We're good, we're ready to move on. Just joking. Okay, so we are created in God's image, and here we're going to dive into each one of these attributes, and we're going to discover which ones are more dominant to us. Is that interesting? Okay. So if you picked up these 10 spheres divide into 2. Anyone tell me what 2 they divide into?
The soul and the human soul and the animal soul.
No, so in terms of the actual 10,
Oh,
they divide into 3 and 7. 3 of them are one category, 7 are another category.
I gotta really think on that. Can you look at them because I noticed that.
I'll just give it away because it's so the 3 of them are intellectual and 7 of them are emotional. If you look at the picture of the human being, you saw that they put the intellectual ones on his face, right above his face, and then the emotional ones were throughout his actual body.
And here there's one.
Okay, now in terms of the actual, in terms of the emotions themselves, they divide into 2. Okay, there's the first 3 emotions: kindness, severity, kindness, discipline, and compassion, which are actual emotions of our soul, of our personality. Then there is determination, submission, connection, which are not emotions, but they're traits. To put it in other words, they're the expression, they're the execution of an emotion. Okay? So I have an idea, I feel the idea, I express the idea. The expression will be either with determination, perseverance, or with submissiveness. To be able to give that idea to someone else, I need to be able to connect to them. That comes yesod. Again, this is part of the going down in the human body, right? And then finally we have malchut, which we'll talk about soon. So in terms of the, if you'll forgive me, in terms of the human anatomy, the human body, the Kabbalah teaches us that 3 Chachma Bina Das, the 3 intellectual parts are in our brain. We actually have 3 compartments in our brain. Chesed and Gevura, my right hand, my left hand. Chesed and Gevura, that's my emotions, and we have compassion as well, and we'll see why that's really part of it. But do you have those 3? moving down on our body, we have the expression of our emotions. We have being victorious, being slipping my mind right now. And what was the wording? Being, so we have what,
Victory, listen.
What does it say over there?
Somebody
What-
under the age of 40.
what does it say there?
I can't have my contacts in with my reading glasses and they don't always.
So we have ambition, determination, and then we have submission, humility. That would be in our physical body,
Interesting.
that would be our digestive system,
Ooh.
where we digest food. So here we're digesting our emotions.
So, absolutely. So you're saying which ones are in your stomach? Which are in your belly? What you're.
The determination and the humility, those are the two attributes of expression. They're the same, there's a lot to talk about here, but they align with kindness and severity, but on a lower level. So kindness and severity is deeper inside. It's about my emotions, kind severity. Determination is just kindness a little further down the line. And humility is severity a little further down the line. Okay, and then we have connection and kingship. So let's talk about these things. So chachma, we got this on the board. Chachma is the seed of wisdom. The potential for a fetus. So when you talk about chachma and bina, wisdom and understanding, this is the mother and the father of the emotion. The emotions are called children. Who's the mother? Who's the father? The father is chachma, wisdom, because the father gives a seed. The seed has the potential for the child. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is the potential, the seed, the initial flash of an idea. Often chachma is associated with our connection to faith, to spirituality, to cleaving, connecting to something which I can't necessarily perfectly explain. Okay, so I'm going to actually turn to page 94, which you're probably on, and there's an exercise. And the exercise tells you chachma traits. And I'll give you 1 minute to rate yourself. And we're going to be doing this for the next 10. So hold onto your pen and do that. I think a fair thing to ask ourselves when we're doing this exercise, for me, because most of you, I think all of us around this table, or most of you around this table, I should say, are very developed people. And as we develop, we get better at everything. But there are certain things that our personality never changes. What we like to do doesn't change. So I think the question we could ask ourselves when rating ourselves 1 to 5 is, how annoying is this for me? And how much do I love this? Like, do I love being creative and it gives me energy, or it's tiring and annoying to be creative? Right? And we'll see. I'll talk about this more in the next one. I'll hold your question for 1 minute.
Okay.
So let's go to the next one. This will be on page 95. So we have Bina, which is understanding. Bina is about logical breakdown of creative ideas. Understanding and comprehension. This is the mother of the emotion, because women develop the baby versus the father that gives the initial seed. Analysis. Usually, and I'm not saying always, but usually in human beings, these two traits are opposites. You won't have someone that's creative, that loves being creative, and also loves analyzing their creation. If they're creative, they want to come up with the next idea. But then you have someone that actually hates being creative. Give me something old and I'll break it down for you. You know, a good teacher is someone that's thorough, development. When you have a flash of an idea of a home, I want the home, but how should it look? You need a blueprint. The person that's making the blueprint hates dreaming of the home. And the person that's dreaming of the home hates making a blueprint. It's just opposite personality traits. So here I invite you to look at exercise 95 and to go through the character traits of Bina, and rate yourself 1 to 5. Where would you say you are strong at? Yeah, we're gonna go on to the next one. So then we have Das. Das is connection. What's connection? This Das is called the key to emotion. And this is something very interesting. If I'm developing an emotion, and the way we develop emotion is by thinking about something. But what is the bridge between the idea, the theory, to a feeling about it, to having an emotion to it? The bridge is connection. Okay, and what do I mean by connection? What I mean is it has to become real. Theory is not real. It has to become real. The story goes of the teacher that was hired by this farm person, and he was hired to teach his children because he was homeschooled. So Mark, this is Mark, the owner of the studio.
Hi, guys. Hello.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for
thank
having
you.
us.
We got a yoga class over here too?
You get the first guest free if you want to come.
I missed it. It's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. What was it this morning? Not 7. 9 o'clock this morning.
Anyway.
Thank you. Namaste.
So you have the concept of, so we had this farmer, and the farmer had a teacher working for him. And the farmer was a very simple guy. The teacher was, more learned, and the farmer gets a letter. And he can't read the letter because he doesn't know how to read. So he turns to his teacher and he says, "Could you read me this letter?" And sure enough, he reads the letter, and the letter tells him that the farmer's dad passed. And the farmer faints. So the question is asked, who read the letter? The teacher read the letter. The farmer just heard it from the teacher. And the farmer faints and the teacher didn't faint. Why? And the answer is because it's his father. So let's talk about this. They both can have emotions. But why did his emotions hit and his emotions not hit? Because for the farmer, it was personal. That's the word, personal. And that's what Das is. Das is about making something relevant and personal. We could talk about the greatness of God, but there's nothing personal about it. If we think about it every day for a week, it starts to become personal. It starts to become real. And that becomes the bridge to emotion. It actually says, interestingly enough, that Das is the place in our heart for addiction. Why do we get addicted to things? Why do human beings get addicted to things? The answer is because there's a part of our heart that hooks onto things beyond reason. And that becomes so important to us beyond life itself, beyond the value of what that thing actually gives me. Most of us have a certain level of addiction to food, which means that we feel connected to food beyond its actual value. Where does that come from? That comes from this ability to hook yourself onto something, to connect to something. Now, why do I call that an ability? Because it's actually a plus. Because when it comes to serving God, I could be someone that doesn't have the time or the patience to develop a real emotion for God. But you know what? If I devote myself, if I hook myself on, if I say, I'm going to do this every day, I'm going to light the Shabbos candles, I'm going to go to shul, I'm going to learn something, it becomes part of our personality, it becomes part of who we are. We become an addict to that thing, which is a positive thing. What?
Conditioning?
We condition ourselves. Yes, we choose to make that who we are, to define ourselves by that. And that's an incredible gift. It's incredibly redeeming to not have to go through complete turnover, but just have the ability to hook myself onto that and choose that this is what I'm about, that this is important to me. Someone shared with me once that when we go on vacations, you could go on this, exotic vacation, you'll come back, what will you actually talk about? You won't talk about the vacation, you'll talk about things that hit very deep. So one person will talk about the food. So they could have went to the nicest place in the world, but to talk about the food, you don't understand, the food was so good because that's what they care about. So this guy was saying, he was saying, imagine what?
That's right.
I'm not involved, it's not close.
That is fun.
Oh, I thought it was a doorbell.
Imagine having the ability to go on a vacation and to come back and what I really care about. I had such an inspirational moment. I studied something that meant something to me. That only comes from we hook ourselves to this lifestyle. This becomes so important to us that even when we're doing other things, we're enjoying ourselves, which is great. But what we actually, our memories, what actually hit deep was my life is about meaning. And that's what I remember. Was it meaningful? Okay, so I'm going to turn to page 96. I'll do that exercise. We are running very, very, very late. So I'm going to start moving a little quicker, but I'll give 30 seconds for this exercise. Perfect. Okay, turning to page 97, we're hitting emotions. The first emotion is kindness, the desire to give, to share without restraint. Abraham represented kindness. He just wanted to give. I'll let you do the exercise, 97. Then we're turning to page 98. So we have discipline, gevura. This is the opposite of chesed, of kindness. Discipline is calculated, grounded, realistic, meticulous in how and whom to give. Judging. Now, this person sounds very bad, but he's not bad at all. He's actually more caring than the kindness person. You know why? Because the kindness person doesn't care about what's going to be good for you. They just want to give to you. The discipliner is someone that cares for you and says, well, what's going to do well for you? A good teacher is someone that knows discipline and understands the students. Sarah said, you got to send Ishmael out of the house for Isaac's sake. Abraham said, how could you kick a kid out of the house? Abraham is kindness. Sarah is discipline. Abraham doesn't understand the concept of sometimes you have to put your foot down for the greater good. Okay, so that's 98. Moving on from 98, we did that? I'll give a minute for page 98. Again, you could always revisit this after. Okay, so I'm going to move on to 90. Well, now I'm at 90. Well, they're both 98. Are they both 98? What Faris is 98 or 99? 99. Okay, so this is compassion. This is beauty. Why is this beauty? Tiferes literally means beauty. Why is compassion beauty? Because beauty is a mix of colors. Where does beauty come from? Beauty is harmonization. And to harmonize. A healthy balance of chesed and gevura. So chesed is the person I told you that doesn't think about the other person. They just say, I want to give. I'm going to give because I want to give. Discipline is the person that says, I'm going to give not because I want to give, because they deserve it or they don't deserve it. And I will give or I won't give. What's compassion? Compassion is a feeling that comes from me, not like discipline. It's like kindness, it's coming from me. But who's arousing the compassion? Who's arousing the compassion? Is that just coming from me, or is the person,
The person that you're.
the pitiful
feeling.
person is arousing compassion? So in that sense, it's a blend. I'm going to give more than they deserve because I have compassion for them, but I'm giving it to them because of their state. Unlike kindness, which is just giving. So this is called beauty. It's a mix of the two. Harmonization, a perfect balance, which is why I mentioned before that although there's three emotions, essentially there's two. Because there's kindness and discipline, compassion is a blend of those two. That would be on 99. We'll give a few seconds for that. Then we have on page 100, determination, netzach, victorious. Adversary brings out the best, the ability to move forward, not like anything in the way, push past the obstacles. This is the acting upon our emotions. And I'll let you fill in that exercise as well on page 100. Okay, then we have page 101. We have submission, hod, which is about the ability to submit to a higher cause, humility, patience, gratefulness. Often this could come to haunt us because someone could take advantage of us. But in a positive situation, it's actually a very good thing. The first word in prayers is the word hodu, which is the same word as moda ani. We spoke about the moda ani prayer. Moda comes from this word of submission. I submit myself to you. So that's the very same word. So that's exercise on page 101. Moving on, and I'm sorry that I'm moving so fast. It's already 11:32, so I am 2 minutes late already, and I have another 6 slides. We have Yesod. Selflessness, connection to others, interested in genuine relationships. That's page 102. I'll let you do that exercise. Okay, now we have page 103. We have Malchut, which is expression. This is the ability to lead, associated with speech, action, and receptivity. So you might ask, Malchut is the ability to lead and the ability to be a student, the ability to receive. Isn't that opposites? And the answer is no. You know why? A good leader is someone that completely sees the other person. Leading is actually about receiving the other person. Which I'm not doing a very good job at right now, but that's fine. Okay, actually, so that's page 103. And we are moving along again because we're simply out of time. But I'll let you catch up whatever you didn't do after. So why is this so important? Page 106, text 5. Joanne, let's take me in text 5 on page 106.
God gives a unique personality to each person. We all must pursue our mission in accordance with this personality because it comprises our portion in this world. For example, if you were more cerebral and utilized the trait for the study of Torah, surely you will observe the other mitzvah and commit yourself to the mission shared by every Jew. But you will be extra particular and passionate about Torah study because it comports with your personality. If kindness is your personality, utilize this trait to love and care for others. This includes sharing the rich heritage of Judaism with Jews who have never the opportunity to learn about it. This doesn't mean that you won't study Torah or perform other mitzvah. It means that you ought to be particularly spirited about your caring for others, given the unique capacity you have for this. If you are a pragmatic person who knows how to get things done, involve yourself in starting an organization and spare no effort to get it off the ground. Alternatively, an existing institution, a school, may have a particular challenge that is inhibiting student performance. Can you solve it? Perhaps you can alleviate the plight of the poor and homeless. Sure, you will also study Torah and develop emotional connections with others, but place extra focus on getting things done.
Okay, great. So the reason why this is so great, and we could revisit these tests that we've done for ourselves later, is realizing what we're good at. What makes us happy? What are the things that God gave us that are part of our character? And recognizing that allows us to see that this is where I thrive. And when it comes to doing mitzvot, every mitzvah is important, but it makes sense, and there should be specific mitzvot that make you more excited, that you connect to. And you know what? God created you to do those mitzvot in particular. Those are more important for you for you to accomplish. One second, let's just finish, and then we'll go over questions. We're almost done. Now, what's the connection to happiness? So this is the entry point for happiness for two reasons. Number one, because engaging in our purpose makes us happy. Number two, as you mentioned so beautifully at the beginning of this class, utilizing our strengths makes us happy. You also mentioned the opposite way, that when we don't utilize our strength, it makes us sad. But on a positive note, when we allow our talents and our abilities and our art and our character to flourish, that's what actually brings tremendous joy. And like you said, give away your talents, which is great. I love that. So with that, I'm going to invite you to do the final exercise on page 108, which is going to just be the takeaway from today's class. What's your takeaway from today's class? Okay, the next class is going to be about overcoming stress through positivity, how to have joy when it hurts. That's going to be the next class. Key points. Let's just review what we did today. A number of factors point us to our mission in life. Parents, place of birth, and I'm reading inside on page 109.
Oh,
Era of birth, education, environment, talents, emotional makeup, character, inclinations, notable experiences of childhood and adolescence. Number two, these factors form the book of our life, a book that requires study to learn from it how to behave, both in interpersonal relationships and our relationship with God. Three, Jewish mysticism teaches that God created the world through 10 attributes. Every human soul is a microcosm of these 10 attributes. But within each soul, one or two of these attributes are dominant, which gives us our personality. This too should guide us toward our mission in life. 4, upon analyzing the different factors of our life, we are empowered to use them as guides for how to make choices. This includes tapping into our background and personality to inform how we engage in good deeds and which projects will pour extra investment. 5, upon analysis of these different factors of our life, we are empowered to use them as guides. No, we just read that. Number 6, when people find more ways to tap into and utilize their personality strengths, they substantially increase their happiness. And thank you for joining me. My
this
pleasure.
is a tough question.
I love
What
it.
happens if you have some very good talents